Okay. Well, we have the Gulleys with us this morning. I'm kind of excited. I went to school with Robin and Myron, but that was just a few years ago. But just to kind of connect and hear some of the good things that God has done. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves, share a little bit about your family, like where you're from, where you grew up, whatever you'd like to share.
Sure. I'll go first. My name is Myron. I was born in California. I was an Air Force brat. My dad was career Air Force, so that meant moving around a lot for the first, 12 or 13 years of my life. We ended up in my parents' hometown of Portsmouth, Ohio. And that's where I went from junior high. Dad still lives in Portsmouth. But that included moves to Japan and South Carolina that I remember, Arizona. But I went to junior high and high school in Portsmouth, Ohio, small town, Southern Ohio, which was a little bit of a shock. After living overseas and on the bases and stuff like that. That was a little bit of a culture shock. I was raised Nazarene. If you, I can't remember, I should have looked it up. In one of Paul's letters, he talks about being a Jew among Jew and a Nazarene or Nazarenes, a Pharisee among Pharisees and all that. I kind of go by that a little bit as far as Nazarenedom. Both sets of my grandparents went to the same Nazarene church I think they started in the 20s or the 30s, the 1920s, 1930s. And that's where my parents met and grew up together. They got married. I showed up, but went to Mount Vernon Nazarene College. And so as far as my background, I'm a Nazarene kid. As far as I did Bible quizzing every year that we could do it. I was on the impact team. I was raised in Nazarene's youth summer camp meeting on Morse Road. Morse Road, for those of you who may have heard of it but have never been there are no other camps other than Morse Road Camp. It was the one by which all the other camps are measured. But that's me. That's where I came from. That's where I was raised, and that's still a lot of what I identify with. I got to college. I made it to college. I made it to Mount Vernon, and that's where she comes in.
Yeah. Can I start before then? Yeah. So I was actually born. I'm like a Kentucky person through and through. I was born in Lexington when my dad was at the University of Kentucky. And then we lived in the boondocks, and I mean boondocks in Eastern Kentucky until middle grade school. We moved to Ashland, Kentucky, which is right on the Ohio River across from Portsmouth. I always tell him we're probably related and just don't know it. Don't tell my kids that. But then we so lived there, and then halfway through my freshman year of high school, we moved to Perrysburg, Ohio, which is just south of Toledo. And that's really where I solidified my relationship with Christ. In fact, Chip, you're on there? Wave, Chip. Chip and I were actually in church youth group together, not in the same school, but youth group. And we just had a really, really small but strong youth group. In a church of about 100, we had like 15 or so teenagers, and a bunch of us ended up at Mount Vernon. And just, I think it really made a huge difference in our lives going forward. So I do have two brothers. I'm the middle of two.
So I've got a brother. He's younger.
Only brothers. We only deal with boys. Okay. So my older brother is an attorney in Nashville. He also went to Mount Vernon. Well, we all went to Mount Vernon, all of us. My younger brother has a PhD in computer science, works for, his company was bought out by Microsoft there in Pittsburgh. So I was raised in the church. My parents were not raised in the Nazarene church. They were both raised Methodist, but my dad was raised in a very, very conservative Methodist church in Eastern Kentucky. My grandmother never cut her hair, always wore it in buns, always wore dresses. There was a little rebellious part there for me too, that, you know, okay, so I have to wear a dress. What's the shortest miniskirt I can find? So, but that was just going to Mama and Papa's house. But my mom was raised toward Mansfield. My grandfather, who's 96, still lives on the family farm that was my great grandparents. So I've got a huge, but both came from Christian families. So we have a huge Christian heritage on both of our sides. So, and then I ended up at Mount Vernon because originally my dad said, you can go to any school you want to, being the only girl. Okay, great. So I was looking at all these places like out west and in the south. And then he was like, well, you have to go to a Christian school. And then it was, oh, you have to go to a Nazarene school. And then it has to be a Nazarene school in Ohio. So that choice was kind of made for you. So, but we ended up there, and that's where we met. And we traveled, Myron and I traveled on Living Witness. It was we'd go into churches and sing and preach and that kind of stuff on the weekends. And that's how we met, but we didn't date then. We dated later when he was done running around with all my friends.
I met Robin. You're 2 years younger than I was. Am. So, but I remember the first time I saw Robin walking across the cafeteria in Mount Vernon at the Naz. And I was like, I asked the guys, I was like, wow, do we know who that is? Yeah, that's Kevin's sister. We know her brother, Kevin. And at first that kind of struck me like, yeah, that's Kevin's sister, right? So obviously I got past that. I remember the first time I really got to talk to Robin. She came in, she was a freshman and I was a junior. She came in and interviewed, auditioned for a ministry team, and I was on leadership. And on her audition paper, I remember putting a star up in the corner thinking, I'm going to travel, she's going to be on my team. I'm going to travel with her. And what I didn't think through the issue is at least for me, you didn't date people you traveled with. You know what I mean? Because that could cause friction on if you're on a ministry weekend and you're not, you happen to be fighting with your person you're dating and stuff like that, whatever. So I had a rule where I didn't date anybody on my team. So that whole first year we traveled together, but I dated all of her friends. So I could, not all your friends, a lot of her friends I dated with, so I just keep an eye on her. And so I knew what she was doing the whole time. So anyways.
But we were fortunate that we grew up in the Christian homes that really foster that sense of hospitality for us, that you invite strangers into your home and you have people in and you make connections with them. So especially, I mean, Sunday afternoon dinner, there was always somebody new sitting at our table, and you can better than.
Well, just growing up there in Portsmouth, back in the day, we still had revivals, like a week-long revivals through the week and stuff. And it was very common if our church was in revival, that our house, it was my mom who would have Sunday dinner for the pastor's family and for whoever the evangelist was or the music people that were in. They would always end up at our house on Sunday afternoon. It's just the way it was. I was raised to take care of your pastors, and so it was. That's just what we do. You know, it's just what you're supposed to do, and you know, it was all part of being a church family. That we spent that time together. It was valuable time.
Yeah, and he was lucky because he was really raised near family. I wasn't. And then we get married in '93 and moved to the Washington, D.C. area because he works for the federal government. And this is really pre-cell phones, unless you want one of those like honking big ones that cost you several $100s a month or whatever. And that's when you remember when you had to pay for long distance calls and the rest of it. So we move out there and I don't know a soul. And well, he had already been there. You need to tell how, because this is a good God story, how you found church.
Hey, Kendra, if we go off the rails, you need to let us know because we're rolling. after I graduated from Mount Vernon, I had an accounting business double major. The only really full-time position I could find was in DC, and I worked for the Department of Treasury. And so I moved out there, and she was going to finish college in Mount Vernon. She had 2 more years. So I was in Virginia, and the first thing that I needed to find, and it was in need, was I needed to find a church. That's all I knew. I was all by myself. I didn't know anybody. And so back in the day when we had a Yellow Pages phone book, there was no Google, there was no internet. We found a church. I went to the church that first Sunday morning, and I show up all by myself. And the church was huge for me. The church ran like 500 or so. But everybody had name tags already pre-printed. If you attended there, you had your own name tag. So when you walk in, you say, hey, my name's Myron. They give you your name tag, you walk out. Or you walk into service. If you were a visitor, you had to fill out your name tag and put it on. And so that was a way, their system for identifying newcomers. And so I got my name tag, I wrote my name, Myron G. And I sat and I purposely left like two seats on my left. So I knew nobody would take those 2 seats. Like, who's going to come in and sit by a new person? So the worship service starts. The worship's amazing. But no kidding, in the first song, an older couple comes in and sits right beside me. Like, you could be kidding me. And so back in those services back in the day, you used to do a meet and greet time when you get to kind of shake hands with people. Of course, that's pre-COVID. This couple leans over and she says, hey, hi, our name's Don and Ruth, and nice to meet you. And they're having a little conversation. I introduce, my name is Myron Gulley. They say, you're new. Yeah, this is my first Sunday. So anyways, they're having a conversation all through church. I can't hear what they're saying. At the end of church, she comes over and talks to me and says, are you Myron Gulley from Mount Vernon? And I'm like, yes, I'm from Mount Vernon. What? And they had just flown in from California visiting their daughter, who was on staff somewhere in California with an apartment mate of mine who had just gone to California. And he told them that his apartment mate had just moved to DC. And if they happen to run into you or into me, say hi, make a connection. And they normally would be in the choir singing, but they were late. And so they came in and took the only 2 seats that were available, which were by me. And the idea that that's a coincidence, because I was convinced I was going to go church shopping and look all over for a new church and all that. The first Sunday I go to a church, and 2 people that I've never, ever met or heard of connect with me. And the interesting thing is, after that point, they were older. They're like my parents, grandparents' age. I was never going to connect with these people, but they established that line for me that I immediately got to meet the youth pastor. He pulled me into youth ministry there, and that suddenly became our church family there at Calvary Church. We still talk about Calvary Church like it's our second home. And it really has to do because of really that morning, that idea of church shopping. I've never been a church shopper after that. It's always a matter of, God, put me somewhere, open a door somewhere. And that's always way it's always worked out for us.
And so then I moved there in 93 after we get married. And so we get married and we move there, and then he immediately leaves to go to Georgia for 2 weeks for work, but that's a whole nother story. We have a lot of those. And so I was actually, my first job was teaching senior high. I graduated with an education degree from Mount Vernon. And so I'm teaching a senior high school on a block schedule, teaching yearbook and SAT prep. And it just was not the thing for me. And so I ended up getting a job at a middle school, which I love. That's like more my pace. And he's teaching junior high, and we have a junior high small group. And the only people I know are junior high people. So you can imagine.
Teaching junior high Sunday school.
Junior high Sunday school. Sorry, junior high Sunday school. And finally, I'm like, I have got to meet some adults. And no joke. I mean, it was pretty bad. You can imagine what my mental state was like. So I got really involved with the drama department. Ended up being in charge of the drama ministry there at church. And we, you know, a church of 500, we were doing stuff minimally once a month. So, and that was just a really cool thing to see how God could use drama and worship ministry and that kind of thing. I was also very involved with missions, very, very strong missions program. That's how we were able to see a lot of the world living there. We did mission trips to Australia and Kenya. Myron thought I wasn't going to come home. But, you know, being able to go all over the world. And we had, you know, at that point didn't have kids, but our church family was our family, and we were able to live life with them. And they, you know, but because of how we were raised, when we finally, we were only supposed to be there 2 years, by the way, 14 years later is when we finally moved. But because of how we were raised with that whole sense of hospitality, when we finally decided to put roots down and buy a house and the rest of it, and just the house that God gave us was pretty incredible, that whole story. But we had, one of my best friends went through a pretty bitter divorce, and we opened up our home, and she lived with us for about a year. We had a new pastor that came and could not find a place to live, so he and his family lived with us for like 4 months or something like that.
Too long.
So it was all good. But it's just, I mean, just God just blessed us and took that heritage that we had and really grew it. And it was modeled for us what we needed to do in terms of how to serve others and how to let God be, you know, use us to be a blessing for others. And it was nothing that we did, absolutely not. I mean, the whole house deal, we should never have ever been able to have the house that we had there, but we met this older man who owned it, and he absolutely loved us. Like, he had 3 different contracts.
You keep this straight. Robin met this older man, and he took her in like a daughter.
Yeah, that's true.
I never met this guy until they did a house showing twice. And it was obvious that this man was going to sell us his house, whatever it took, because he loved his house, and he wanted what he considered the right people to own this house, that would love the house, whatever.
To be good neighbors.
That would be good, well, good neighbors, good people, all of that, and would value the neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. And for some reason, he thought Robin was that person. And it worked out.
Another one.
Right.
So, but then we moved to,
Well, I think we want to talk about that small group that we had.
Oh, go ahead, you do that.
One thing that we love to do, and there's a few of you on here can speak to, we truly love the idea of small groups at church.
But we didn't always.
And that's what I'm getting to. When we were in that house, it was obviously way bigger than us. It was before kids. But we were able to our church at that time decided we were going to do small groups. I had never done an adult small group. Robin had never really done an adult small group like this. And so they put people in small groups according to their zip code, so that people who live close together could meet, which was a big deal in the DC area because traffic's so horrible. And the small group that we got put in, and we said we would host it because we lived like 3 minutes from the church. And they put us in a small group with people I had never met before.
Hadn't even seen.
And I was on the church board. She was doing music ministry. And for us not to have ever met these people or really know who they were, and they were coming to our house, that was a big step. And so we started doing the small group, and it was was it 30 days of the Rick Warren series?
It was a church of the Nazarene thing. Do you guys remember that they wanted everybody to do groups?
But Anyway, we started this.
Like no, this had to be early 2000s because we had just had Brandon. Yeah, look, Christy's laughing at us because she knows how our brains work.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we start this small group and we get through the first session and even the second week of this small group. And I remember being in bed with Robin and thinking, I don't think these people like us. There wasn't a lot of interaction. It was just like, I'm trying to lead this small group and nobody's saying anything. It's like it's silence. It hurt. But the great thing about it is we stuck with it and everybody stuck with it. And even now, that's been 20 years. We've been out of that place when we moved here 13 years ago. And there are still people that were in that small group that we're still connected with. The last time I was over there, there were still some folks there that still refer to the Gulley small group. And they're there for a long time. That group still met even after we were gone, but they still in the bulletin, they called it the Gulley small group. It was just because they became our family. Because, you know, like we really didn't have cell phones. There was no internet, email stuff, not like everybody has now. And so we really grew with these. Our kids, they took care of our kids for us. We did life together. And it just shows the value of community and loving one another and living, and just even as strangers, we grew together. There was no family there. There was no history there. We had to make it up as we went. And we tried to do that now. Our small group here in Westfield, they talked to me from the beginning. That was a good thing. I didn't have to wonder if they liked me or not. So that was a good thing.
But food, we've decided food is key. No matter what you do, just feed people and then they'll like you.
And Jesus did the same thing. If you look, Jesus broke bread with people, man. It's like an unkept secret. You're like, if you want somebody to show up, feed them.
And I'll tell you, that's been really hard for us with COVID, is that because we're trying to be smart about things with our small group, that we met online most of the spring and summer. And then we took a little bit of break and went back in person, but now with the numbers going sky high again, the past few weeks, we've been meeting online again. And that's hard because you're not able to sit across the table from somebody while you're sharing food and just chat about what's going on. I mean, we tried, our Zoom meetings last way too long. Or actually Microsoft Teams or whatever it is we're using. So, but that's been really difficult, I think, for us. This is fine, but it's not the same as sitting next to somebody and looking them in the eye and being able to, you know, be there as they shed a tear or you feel like giving up. So I would say that would be a struggle and for Myron working from home.
I never leave. This is it. This is all I got.
At least I get to leave. And, you know, when we were in the DC area, I really think it was God ordained. At the time, I was kind of freaking out. What do you mean I'm moving to Washington, DC? We lived in Virginia. He worked in DC. I actually worked in Maryland, but, you know, God opened the doors. I was able to get my master's degree from Johns Hopkins, which never in a million years would I think I'd be able to do that. I had a fantastic job. I was an English department chair in a very, very large school district. And there it was very different than here, that I was more in an administrative role, got to hire people or encourage them to get a different job and just really take care of people in that way. And Myron, you know, really moved up to managing people and still does that today. But, you know, we really thought we were going to be there for the long haul. At that point,
we bought a house.
We had 2 children who were born there. And we were driving home from Thanksgiving one year in 2006. Ansley had been born July of 2006. And that's our daughter, if you don't know who that is. Our son was then 4 or 5 years old. No, 4 years old, Braden. And Myron looks at me, he goes, I think we can move back to Ohio. I'm like, what? Are you freaking kidding me? We finally gotten where he goes, no, I think God is like, we've taken the church through 2 pastoral transitions. So much stuff, really had friends that were family. And so then that started a whole nother process of, okay, God, is this really what you want? And we didn't even put our house on the market. Our house sold, we were able to sell it to our worship pastor for way, way more than we bought it for right before the recession hit. We were homeless for about a month before we got our house here in Ohio, but just the house that God provided. And just, it's just amazing how when you are in relationship with him and having those conversations, like, okay, God, what do you really want me to do? And are heartfelt and honest about it, how he truly does answer those prayers.
Yeah, I'll never forget, because up until that point, it really wasn't much of a thought moving back to Ohio. It just, but then we would do Christmas, Thanksgiving and Christmas back here with family. And once we had the kids and that trip back and forth, my parents were still in Southern Ohio. All of her family was still here in Central Ohio. It just became something that it would be a really good thing if we could spend more time with family.
Really for our kids.
Well, and we were considering trying to figure out where Braden was going to go to school, start elementary school, because where we lived, while the neighborhood itself was a pretty good neighborhood, that school pod within that school system was not a strong one. And we were seriously considering whether we would put him in a private school along those lines. And to the point where, do we move physically within Northern Virginia, like move into another neighborhood for a better school system? Even to the point of, can we make a move somewhere else, like to Ohio? And God just kicked these doors open for us as far as being able to sell our house. My job had gone pretty much, I was working from home there. So I kind of walked in and said, I would like to work from home, but what if I did that in Ohio versus Fairfax, Virginia? And they're like, yeah, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. We'll try it. And so, I've been working from home since 2007 here in Ohio, but even there is 2005 or so. I was working from home. And so it just really, you could just see where God just opened the doors. What's that?
Because we moved into our house in 2000, about 2001 that they started that.
Right.
Not every day, but so it's just kind of cool.
But it was amazing how God really opened those doors for us. It wasn't an easy move. I mean, it was a move. We moved a family across country. We didn't have a house.
Sure.
And I lived with my in-laws for the first time for like 2 months with my kids.
We did not. We were there a week.
Oh, geez, whatever. The McCanns, right? But just that transition, looking back on it, you can see God's hand there, but still, it wasn't an easy thing, but he did open doors and he was faithful and took care of us.
But then, so we move here. So we finally get in our house. Well, we're supposed to be in our house and then the movers don't show up. So it was a few more days and then the movers finally showed up. And so we get in our house, his brother's here helping. And
That's here
in Ohio, sorry, here in Ohio. And we're sitting at the table and he looks at me and he goes, Myron looks at me and says, I kind of have this numbness in my arm and my, and it's kind of going to my chest. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? What? Wait, what? And so his brother, we don't have a clue where a hospital is. We don't have a clue where anything is. So his brother takes him to Riverside. He ends up there overnight. We're like, we haven't even unpacked everything in this house. And he's spending the night at Riverside. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? What are we doing? And they do all these like stress tests and they're monitoring his heart and all this, thinking he might have had a heart attack. And MRIs and all that kind of, and he gets home and so we have to go see specialists and all this kind of stuff, like a neurologist and all this kind of thing. And he's Googling all this and he's decided he has MS. And so I'm like,
Google said I had 2 weeks to live.
Not really. So he decides he has MS. And I'm like, God, this is not happening. This is not what we're doing. And so I went in, I remember it clear as day. I went into our bedroom, into the closet. We had a walk-in closet, and got down on my knees. And I'm like, look, you told us to come here. You said this is, sorry, I'm gonna cry. He's like, this is what you said we are supposed to do. You cannot do this to us. I don't care what you're trying to teach us. Not now. I can't do it. And I'd also had a really, really rough school year because Ansley had been born the summer of 2006, and I started the school year late as a result. And it was a very tumultuous year, and I just needed a break. And, then we end up with this big move and school over there is not out until the middle of June, so I'm trying to finish up the school year with my department and sell a house and clean up a house and pack a house and then do another one. And so I'm serious. I'm on my knees. I'm like, okay, that whole come to Jesus meeting, I had one with Jesus. So I was like, you said you would guide us and protect us. And we feel like, we prayed about this and this is what you want us to do. And like that, like this overwhelming peace just came over him. And he's like, I got you. You're okay. Myron's all right. I was like, okay, are you sure? And he's like, no, Myron's okay. And so I walked in, plain as day, I walked into his office and I said, you're fine. And Myron's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I said, God just told me you're fine. So you need to quit worrying about this. And so we went to see a neurologist and all that kind of stuff, and come to find out, what's wrong with you?
He said I had a pinched nerve.
Yeah.
So I sit like this now. So
no, he had a pinched nerve in his elbow, just where he was sitting at his desk or on the chair, and it just pinched it, and it was going clear down his arm and clear up into his chest. And so gave him some exercises. I'm like, okay, God, thanks. That was you again. So just, and then when we lived here for several years, and my parents decided to sell their place in Perrysburg and asked if they could live with us half the year because they have a home in Florida. And so we prayed and prayed about that. Like, is this what we should do? Is it not? And our house was on the market like a year, but we really felt like God was telling us to do that. And at that point, I was part of a community Bible study. And finally, I'm like, I'm a very independent person, those of you that know me, and self-reliant, which is a huge flaw at times, especially when it comes to dealing with God. And finally, I said to them, I'm like, okay, look, we've got this house that's been on the market for like a year, and we really feel like God wants us to do this, and we need to sell it. This was on a Wednesday. No joke. They were like, yep, we're going to pray. Saturday comes, we have a contract on our house. I mean, it was like, okay, hello, once again, yeah, I get it. You need to let others into that circle and to pray for you and to support you and not rob them of an opportunity to minister to you, because we were so used to ministering to others that we forgot, I won't say we, that we need to allow God to use others in our lives, not be so self-reliant, not think that we can do it all, that we need those people in our circle who will bring over meals, who will clean our house, who will come over and hold that baby who will not stop crying because she has such horrible acid reflux, So God has just proved himself over and over and over again to us, and just across the board. And so with, COVID hitting, when we moved here, I chose, it was a very conscious decision on our part that I was going to stay home with the kids. So that our kids are sane is a miracle. But then as they got older and the volunteer opportunities in school and all that stopped, I started substitute teaching, and I became a DC tour director, which was so much fun, being able to travel and be with middle school kids, all those trips to DC. But then COVID hit and that was gone. And so God opened this door with a school that I took to DC several times, that I became their building sub this year. And then, no joke, a week before school started, they called and said, look, we have this position, would you take it? And I went to Myron, I'm like, I don't know if I can, because I'm actually teaching technology. I'm like, I don't, I know enough, but I know enough to get into trouble. So, and it was just one of the, and they're like, just walk through the door. God is like, I'll take care of you. Just walk through the door. And I did. And it's been so much fun. I mean, I'm teaching coding and how to create apps and websites, and which is something I didn't know anything about before. But it's just how God has opened these doors. And, sorry, it's pretty incredible to me just how he works when we choose to let him, I guess, is. And with Myron doing his job and the opportunities to become, training to be a director, and our kids are, our kids know Jesus, which is the most important thing. I mean, it's just pretty incredible. Sorry, that's all I got.
We should, Kendra.
Sorry, we just talked.
No, you're fine. This is the best interview. It's the best interview I've had to do. I've asked one question.
It's like when you spin the top, it takes off and goes, right? So
I have one question before I open it up to those who are also with us online today.
We're now bored.
Talk to me a little bit. It seems as I've listened to your stories and things like that, and seen your obedience in serving and the gift of hospitality that both of you have offered and opened your homes to. What does self-care look like? Because you give, but then it's like, whoa, I'm like out of breath, I mean, I found myself doing that in ministry for many years, but I mean, for each of you, what does that kind of self-care, your personal, maybe it is just your quiet time with the Lord that really just rejuvenates you, but what does that kind of look like?
When we have found that we have to take some time, that we take breaks, that we feel like God has gifted all of us in so many different areas. And in fact, as I feel very strongly about spiritual gifts. In fact, taught a course on it several different times, and how God will use us in our area of giftedness. And I think that for us was the biggest thing, was truly identifying how God has gifted us to give him the glory and to edify others, and to identify our passions so that we don't get burnt out so quickly. That's, I think, but I am more, and people have a hard time believing this, but I really am an introvert. I mean, I'll sit here and talk to you, but this will exhaust me because I'm having to deal with so many people. And I find for myself, I have to have that time where, and my kids recognize it, Myron recognizes it, that I have to be away. I also teach the children's quizzing, or take care of the children's quizzing program at church. And that's the school year. And then I've been asked to do stuff in the summer. I'm like, no, I have to have a break. And that's the thing that I appreciate about Westerville, that when we first came here, when we first walked in, Mark was kind of like, what do you want to do? Or do you need a break? And we were like, we need a break. Mm-hmm. And I think so many times in the church, we feel like we need to be minister, but we sometimes don't realize we need a break and just time to reflect and be more in tune with, not that you're not in tune with God before, but it's just a different kind of thing. I don't know, you.
Sure. And no, that's a real thought that we had to have I remember very clearly when we were at Calvary in Virginia, there was at one point when they asked Robin to do something in children's ministry. And it was one of those things where when you laid out the schedule, we have this piece here where it could work. Robin can do it in this one piece. Everything else is crowded, but we do have this time. And it coincided with, I can't remember if it was a sermon or, we didn't have podcast. But at some point, there was some information that we heard, some leadership on the power to say no. And that if you're a leader, it's okay to say no. And we leaned on that. At that point, I remember very clearly at lunch with Robin that day saying, it's okay to say no, that we can step away and let somebody else lead here. And as a leader at that point, it was a big lesson for me, not only to give people the opportunity to say no, to step back, but also to do that for me. And that's something that I've had to incorporate. So that's been, however long, 15 years, that I have to be very intentional about saying no. And that there are times when there may not be anything else on my calendar, but I do need to say no, and just to step back and take that break. Even though being around people that energizes me. I'm more of a people person. There are still times when I need to just hang back and be quiet, and be still. And it takes a little more effort for me to do that. But in the last few years, I've learned the value there. And I have to be intentional about it. And, the fear of being appeared like, oh, of appearing not willing to do something or lazy or whatever that is. I need to fight that concern about giving off that appearance that it's okay to say no sometimes, to take a breath.
And that's my freshman year in college. Dr. Paul Mattis, who Kendra, invited me to be part of a group. It was an intergenerational group, and it was the search for significance, and just who we are in Christ. And on the beginning of Galatians, he's like, who am I trying to please? Am I trying to please God, or am I trying to please man? Because if I'm trying to please man, I'm done. It's a fruitless effort. That the only person I really can please is God. But both of us growing up in homes where it was give, you make people happy, you please people by give. And so that was like kind of an epiphany that, okay, we don't have to do what everybody else thinks we should do. Now, having said that, I can see how it would be really easy to fall into the rut that, oh, I'm taking a break, and that break becomes a year or 2 years or 3, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if we totally answered your question.
No, you did great. No, thank you so much just for your vulnerability and honesty, being transparent there. Before we have about 5 more minutes, let me open it up to those who are online with us. If you have questions, just make sure you unmute yourself so we can hear you. For Myron and Robin.
Chip, where all did you go internationally? You moved to, I know, Japan, but what are some of the countries and times?
I was born in California, lived in Arizona, Japan, South Carolina, Texas for just a few. That I really don't even count that. But internationally, it was just Japan. Now we went to the Philippines, you know what I mean, just like for a weekend, and Thailand and stuff like that. But as far as being stationed overseas, it was just Japan. I was from 3rd through 5th grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, I was in Japan. The disco era in Tokyo, that was the best.
And Robin, where have you traveled internationally? Because I know you said you served in your church in DC.
We went, Myron and I both actually were able to do Australia, Nazarene University. We were there for about a month, 2 weeks a month. We were there actually over the Olympics.
When the Atlanta bombing?
96, yeah.
We were in Australia.
We were in Australia working there. That was kind of cool. Kenya is the big one. We've also done, he hasn't done Kenya. I did Paris, France. We did Germany, Austria, Luxembourg. Believe it or not, okay, this is crazy. I've never been to South America, which my kids are like, how can, the Caribbean to me doesn't count. So I've been all these other places, but I've never been there. It's kind of, so when we first moved this church, you guys reached out to us, made us feel at home. I'm hoping that's home. Oh, you're welcome.
Well, my last question, I ask everyone during these interviews is, how can we be praying for you and your family?
For our kids. That's what seriously, I don't think we've had this conversation many times that our sole purpose once we had kids was to ensure that our kids knew Jesus and had a relationship with the Lord, which that's their choice. But we're trying to put that foundation in there. Braden's in his first year at Capitol and working pretty much a full-time job. He's a good kid, has a good head on his shoulders, but I can see how, it would be easier easy in the secular world just to kind of rely on yourself and do your own thing. So we just really pray for him to stay, in the straight and narrow and where he should be. And Ainsley's a spitfire. She's a boatload of fun, but she's stubborn. And I think that's going to serve her well as an adult. But
If you don't kill her first.
pretty much, if one of us doesn't die. So just, you can really pray for our children that that we parent the way that they need us to. And that, we can continue as a married couple, communicating with each other and loving each other and supporting each other in the way that the other person needs. Right? What do you guys
I
think?
concur.
You're not going to add anything? I guess I'm the one that needs the prayer, not him.
You answered for both of us.
I
You did a good
did.
job.
I'm just teasing.
That's funny.
So thank you, Kendra. Any support, prayer wise, we will gladly absorb any of it. We all need that. We all need that. As much as we can carry each other, especially in these times. I will welcome any thoughts or petitions that you're able to put before God for us. I will honor that.
Yeah. Hey, well, let's close. I'll pray for Robin and Myron and for their kids. And then Jeremy, you can give any final instructions because I don't know when you're hitting the stop button on the record. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, we do thank you so much for the stories of the lives that you have led us in, and to know that your grace and mercy and forgiveness just really do transform who we are. I thank you so much for the church and how the church has shaped this young couple, Robin and Myron, and their family. The church shaped them to serve. The church showed them hospitality. And in turn, you have gifted them with these wonderful gifts and have they've been able to give back to so many people as they have served the church, as they have opened up their home to family, to other church members in times of transition. Lord, you've blessed them in their vocations and allowed them to be light to others that they work with. And Lord, you have also blessed them with 2 beautiful children. And I pray, God, as they continue to parent these soon young adults, that you will just continue to give wisdom and guidance. Help them to continue to have a listening ear to the needs of Ainsley and Braden. I pray, God, that you would just continue to go before them and continue to lead Ainsley and Braden as Ainsley's in high school and Braden's in college. I pray, God, that that the influences that they have in their friendships are positive. I pray that they can continue to be a light in the worlds that they live in each day, because I know how difficult the peer pressure is, and just being accepted and loved amongst your peers at this age is not easy. But I pray, God, that they would rely on your love and grace each day. And I thank you, Lord, for just the opportunity that they've been raised in the church too, and that they can follow you and that they can grow in their relationship with you each day. So continue to be with Robin and Myron and just their day-to-day journey with their kids as they love on them, as they're patient with them at times, and continue to help them to know that you are in control and that you will always go before them with your prevenient grace and just guide their lives to hopefully follow you for the rest of their lives. But we thank you for the opportunity as parents to guide our children, to help them to become independent and hopefully dependent on you in a life with you. Just go with us throughout this week. We thank you once again for our time together in this unique setting. And we ask, Lord, that you continue to keep us safe and keep us healthy and continue to draw us close to you each day as we focus in on your word. We ask all this in your name. Amen.